For thousands of years, humanity looked up at the moon, but there was something we could never see. One entire half of the moon remained hidden from Earth, not because it was invisible, but because the moon is tidally locked to our planet. The same side always faces us. And for most of human history, the far side of the moon existed only as a mystery. Then, in October 1959, everything changed. The Soviet Luna 3 spacecraft traveled around the moon and transmitted the first images of its far side back to Earth. What scientists saw was completely different from the familiar face of the moon. There were far fewer of the enormous dark plains we see from Earth. Instead, the landscape was dominated by mountains, craters, and ancient scars. And one enormous feature immediately stood out: the South Pole Aitken Basin, a gigantic impact structure stretching roughly 2,500 kilometers across. One of the largest and oldest impact features known in the solar system. But this is where the story becomes strange, because the far side of the moon is not only scientifically fascinating, it has become the center of some of the most controversial stories ever told about extraterrestrial activity. Stories of hidden structures, secret bases, unknown civilizations, and even a supposed conflict between extraterrestrial factions. But before we believe any of those stories, we need to ask a much more important question. What do we actually know about the other side of the moon? And what are we only being told? Because sometimes the real mystery is stranger than the conspiracy. According to a controversial extraterrestrial narrative, the moon is not simply a dead rock orbiting Earth. It is described as something much more important: a strategic location, a hidden outpost, and, according to some sources, even a battlefield. The story claims that advanced extraterrestrial civilizations have been present around the moon for decades. Some versions mention Greys. Others describe reptilian or Draco forces. Some even introduce Pleiadian and Arcturian groups. The alleged conflict is said to involve control of lunar territory, technology, and access to Earth. And the far side of the moon is often placed at the center of these stories. Why? Because until the space age, humans could not directly observe it. It was literally beyond our view. And whenever something remains hidden from humanity for long enough, people begin to fill the darkness with possibilities. But there is an important distinction. These stories are claims. They are part of an extraterrestrial contact and disclosure narrative. They are not established scientific evidence. NASA has mapped the moon extensively. The Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter has produced extremely detailed maps of the lunar surface, including the far side. And so far, there is no publicly verified evidence demonstrating an extraterrestrial military conflict occurring on the moon. But that does not mean there is nothing unusual about the far side. In fact, the real science is fascinating enough, because the moon's two faces are genuinely different, and scientists are still trying to understand exactly why. There is one phrase that has helped create the mythology of the moon more than almost any other: the dark side. But technically, there is no permanent dark side of the moon. The far side receives sunlight just like the side facing Earth. The difference is simply this: we cannot normally see it from Earth. And that distinction matters, because the far side has been hidden from human eyes for almost all of history. But when spacecraft finally began exploring it, scientists discovered a landscape that looked dramatically different. The near side contains large dark plains called Maria. These regions were formed by ancient volcanic activity. The far side has far fewer Maria. Instead, it is dominated by heavily cratered highlands. Why are the two sides so different? That question is still an active area of scientific research. One of the biggest clues is the South Pole Aitken Basin, an impact so enormous that it may have excavated material from deep within the moon. NASA describes it as the largest and one of the oldest impact features on the moon. And beneath this enormous basin, scientists have detected something even more intriguing. Gravity measurements revealed a large region of unusually high density beneath the basin. One possible explanation is that it could contain remnants of the metallic material from the asteroid that created the impact. Another possibility involves material formed as the moon's ancient magma ocean cooled. In other words, the far side really does contain mysteries beneath its surface. But none of them require an alien war to be fascinating. Imagine standing on the moon and looking across a landscape that has barely changed for billions of years. No wind, no rain, no forests, no oceans, just ancient rock, and the scars of impacts that happened before human civilization existed. The far side of the moon is essentially a geological time capsule, and one of its greatest mysteries is the enormous South Pole Aitken Basin. The basin stretches for more than 2,500 kilometers. Its impact was so powerful that scientists believe it may have penetrated deep into the lunar crust. That makes the region incredibly valuable, because if we can study material excavated by that ancient impact, we may learn what the moon was like billions of years ago. But there's another reason the region matters: its location. The basin extends across a huge portion of the lunar far side, and nearby regions around the lunar South Pole have become increasingly important for future exploration. Water ice, potential resources, scientific targets, possible landing sites. The moon is no longer just a symbol in the night sky. It is becoming a destination, and as humanity prepares to return, the strategic importance of the lunar surface is beginning to change, which brings us to a very uncomfortable question. If the moon is becoming strategically important, who will control it? And what happens when multiple nations want the same territory? This is where the story takes its darkest turn. For decades, UFO researchers and alleged contactees have claimed that something exists on the far side of the moon. Artificial structures, underground facilities, unusual lights, alien spacecraft, and even enormous bases hidden from human observation. Some narratives go even further. They describe the moon as a contested territory involving multiple extraterrestrial civilizations: Greys, Reptilians, Dracos, Pleiadians, Arcturians, and other alleged non-human groups. In these stories, Earth is not isolated. It is part of a much larger conflict. But there's a problem. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and despite decades of speculation, there is currently no publicly verified scientific evidence proving that extraterrestrial civilizations have constructed military bases on the far side of the moon. That does not mean every strange lunar image is meaningless. It means we need to be careful. A mountain can look like a building. A crater can look artificial. A shadow can create the illusion of a structure. And low-resolution images can transform natural geology into something that appears almost impossible. The question is not, can we imagine an alien base? Of course we can. The real question is, can we demonstrate that one exists? And so far, that answer remains unproven. So what has humanity actually discovered on the far side? Quite a lot. NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter has been mapping the moon since 2009. Its instruments have produced extremely detailed information about the lunar surface: craters, mountains, ridges, impact basins, volcanic structures, landing sites, and potential hazards for future astronauts. The far side is no longer a blank space on a map. We have mapped it, measured it, studied it, and compared it with the side facing Earth. And the results reveal something genuinely strange. The two hemispheres are dramatically different. The far side has a thicker crust on average. It has fewer volcanic maria, and it is covered with enormous numbers of impact craters. One of the most important regions is the South Pole Aitken Basin. NASA estimates that the basin is more than 2,500 kilometers across. And within this enormous region lies one of the moon's deepest and oldest geological scars. There is also evidence of a large, dense mass beneath the basin. But here is the important part. NASA does not describe this as an alien structure. The leading scientific explanations involve natural processes, ancient impacts, metal-rich material, and the geological evolution of the moon. The moon is mysterious, but mystery is not the same thing as evidence of extraterrestrial activity. Now we reach the part of this story that is no longer science fiction. Humanity is going back to the moon, and this time, we are not simply going there to plant a flag. We are building a long-term presence. NASA's Artemis program is focused on establishing sustained lunar exploration. And in 2026, NASA announced further developments involving lunar rovers, landers, and the future moon base concept. The goal is not simply to visit. It is to learn how humans can live and work on another world. China is also pursuing an ambitious lunar program. And in 2024, China's Chang'e 6 mission achieved something historic. It landed on the far side of the moon and returned samples from there to Earth. For the first time in history, humanity obtained samples from the lunar far side and brought them home for detailed scientific analysis. Think about what that means. For thousands of years, the far side was invisible. Then we photographed it, mapped it, landed on it, and now we are bringing pieces of it back to Earth. This is no longer simply a race to explore. It is the beginning of a new era of lunar activity. And that raises an entirely different kind of question. What happens when the moon becomes a permanent human frontier? If there is a war for the moon, it may not be the war described in UFO stories. It may be something much more familiar, a competition between humans. Because the moon contains something increasingly valuable: location, resources, scientific information, and potentially water ice. The lunar South Polar region is particularly important because permanently shadowed areas may preserve water ice. Water could eventually support future exploration. It could potentially be processed into useful resources. And that changes the equation. A lunar settlement would need water. It would need power. It would need communication. It would need transportation. And it would need reliable landing sites. The moon could eventually become more than a destination. It could become infrastructure, a stepping stone toward deeper space. And that is why governments and space agencies are paying increasing attention to it. The first lunar race was about proving that humans could reach another world. The next one could be about staying there. And if that happens, the moon will become strategically important in a way it has never been before. Not because aliens are fighting over it, but because humans may soon be. So after everything we've seen, is there really a secret war happening on the moon? The answer depends on what we mean by war. If we are talking about extraterrestrial armies fighting over lunar territory, there is currently no publicly verified evidence proving that such a conflict exists. If we are talking about secret alien bases, again, the evidence remains unverified. But if we are talking about a new competition over the moon, that is something entirely different. And it is already happening. Nations are developing lunar missions. Private companies are building lunar landers. Robotic missions are exploring previously inaccessible regions. And governments are planning for longer-term lunar operations. So the real story may be even more interesting than the conspiracy, because humanity is slowly transforming the moon from something we simply observe into somewhere we intend to operate. And once people, machines, infrastructure, and resources begin accumulating there, questions of territory and access become unavoidable. Who gets to use the moon? Who controls lunar resources? Who decides where infrastructure can be built? And what happens if two nations want the same location? Maybe the secret war is not between aliens. Maybe the first lunar conflict will be entirely human. For most of human history, the moon was untouchable, a distant world hanging above us. We could watch it, we could worship it, we could write stories about it, but we could never reach it. Then everything changed. We photographed the far side. We landed spacecraft there. We mapped its surface. We brought lunar material back to Earth. And now, we are preparing to return. The stories about secret alien bases may remain unproven. The alleged extraterrestrial war may remain a mystery. But something else is no longer speculation. Humanity is building a future on the moon. And that changes everything. Because the question may no longer be, is someone already hiding on the far side? The bigger question is, who will be there next? Will it be scientists, explorers, private companies, national space agencies, or something we haven't imagined yet? Perhaps one day, human beings will stand on the far side of the moon, look back at Earth, and realize that the greatest mystery was never what was hiding there. It was why, after thousands of years of looking up, we finally decided to go back. This is the Crystal Mind. And remember, we first listened to the story. Then we look behind it to discover what is actually true.